He's sort of guy that, you want to use that analogy, he improves with every brushstroke. Every time he plays a game of rugby, he becomes a better player.
Is that something that you've noticed, though, looking at this team over 2 years, that defensively we aren't quite where we need to be at the moment?
Damian McKenzie had a really good game against Wales. He underplayed his hand. He didn't try and do too much, but his kicking out of hand was as good as anything we've seen from the All Black number 10.
DSPN is brought to you by Novus Glass, proud partner of the Special Olympics New Zealand. The Special Olympics New Zealand National Summer Games is in Christchurch, Otautahi, this December. Across New Zealand, Aotearoa athletes, clubs, volunteers and families are getting ready, training, supporting each other and celebrating as the flame of hope travels down the country. Text Novus to 3598 to support our athletes. That's Novus, Novus, to 3598 to support our incredible athletes at the Special Olympics in Christchurch, Otautahi, this December. Notice it, Novus it.
Welcome to the DSPN.
Team New Zealand's in trouble.
Goal! He's done it again, Ricky Hogan.
The Devlin Sports Podcast Network.
Tony, so we've had a bit of time to think now, and we've got to look back at the season and look at it in its whole and all of the games we've played, and 10 wins, 3 losses. And if you look at the stats around that, it's a good winning percentage. I don't care about stats and percentages. I care about who we beat, how we beat them, what games we lost, how we lost those games, and the context around those games. So I've given the year a C+, which is what I gave it last year after losing 4 games. And because I'm a bit worried, I don't think we've improved a lot. I know we've blooded some players, but I look at those losses, and the losses all came after impressive wins the week before. And one of the things that you always kind of rely on over the last 60 years of my life with All Black rugby, Tone, is that when the All Blacks win, we then go and do it again. And we re-emphasise that we are going to beat you again. And the fact that we followed really good wins with really disappointing losses, and they seem to almost get worse throughout the year. I didn't think it could get any worse than Wellington, but that second half performance against England was an absolute shocker. And so I look at those 3 games, Argentina, South Africa and England, and I can't give us any more than a C+, which is a pass mark. The positives I've got about it is I think we've proven we can beat anyone in the world, and we've got to remember that about this All Black fans. We beat South Africa at Eden Park. We deserve to win that game. So we are there or thereabouts, but we just don't have that consistency yet. We've just got to eliminate the bad days. That's how I've looked at this year. We've got to eliminate the bad days, remember how good we can be. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, probably. I mean, I still think that the loss to the Springboks was the biggest disappointment of the year, because that was a record defeat. And that was a real capitulation. Against England, I think it was certainly disappointing, and it had a very deflating effect on the team, which they were able to bounce back from to a degree. But that's going to be the big rock under the beach towel, those 2 things. And whatever happened in terms of any achievements or wins or progressions and that they made will be shadowed by those 3 defeats, because it's the first time they've ever lost to the Pumas in Argentina. Although, as we said in our other piece, I think Argentina are going to be a real force at the next World Cup. Obviously, that record defeat. I think the most galling thing about the England game is that they started so well, and they got themselves into a situation where if they'd been able to bang one more nail and score one more try, then I think England were looking as though they were heading into a period into a state of disarray, particularly on defence, and they weren't able to do that. And the problem that this team has demonstrated is that one mistake will lead to another one, and then suddenly they're in a hole, and you go back to the missed kicks for touch from penalties that could have put them into an attacking position, and then there's the yellow card, and then there's the uncertainty over what they're going to do at the line out because the hooker's in the sin bin and those things. Things tend to compound themselves, and the question that I've been sort of asking is that how much of this is about leadership on the field, and how much of this is about the ability of the coaching staff to develop those leadership skills and get those decision-making processes right, to instill in the players the ability to make the right calls. And I did hear at one point a comment from one of the coaches saying that in the England game they were doing things that they hadn't been told to do or had been not to do. And that begs the question of, the connection.
And communication,
why people start to ask questions like that. And it has to be addressed, and they will have to address it in a review of the season. The coaches will have to answer to that. But I think also they'll talk to some of the players, and this is where they will get some sort of idea as to what's going on there and how or what they have to do to get it better, so that these mistakes don't have a domino effect where one becomes another one becomes another one. And I suppose the hallmark of the great All Black teams that we talked about and that era through from 2004, 2005 through to 15, 16 was the leadership on field. And Richie McCaw was a great captain, but it was also Kevin Mealamu and Conrad Smith and Sam Whitelock and Kieran Reid and those guys and doing to develop that broad group of leaders throughout the team so that that they can make these decisions, make the good decisions in the key moments. I don't doubt that the talent is there. I think
I agree. I agree.
Yeah. Yep. I think the depth this year, he's been talking about going 4 or 5 deep, and I think that's a stretch in some positions. But
it is,
you take a look at the way Holland and Lord have played on this tour, and Tupouva'i and Paddy Tuipulu. And so suddenly, you've got some depth at lock. Certainly got depth at prop because Lomax didn't go on the tour. But I think Pasilio Tosi has come on leaps and bounds, and he's a massive man. He's incredibly strong, and he's growing and learning about being a prop all the time because not that long ago he was a number 8. So there's some depth in the front row. There's definite depth at lock, including the World Breakthrough Player of the Year. And how good
congratulations to him.
Well, yeah.
It's a great story, Tony. Brilliant story. From the time he got selected, it's been a great story. It's been one of those. And amongst all the year, as we pick it all apart, and we are going to get critical and analyse because that's what we do as fans and that's what we do in our jobs. But there are certain highlights, and that to me has been one of them. Everything about this guy, just you can't help but like. You love his story. You love his humbleness. When he says it's like being in a TV show, I thought it was a great comment about winning that award. But you got to remember he's a young man. All of a sudden, my God, I'm in the world headlights and I'm being awarded these things. And you kind of forget, don't you, when you're grizzled and old like us, what it must be like being in your early 20s and this is happening to you.
Yeah. Well, he came to New Zealand, 16, 17 years of age. And coming from a country where a blank canvas could be turned into a work of art by a Van Gogh or a Rembrandt or something. And he's sort of a guy that, you want to use that analogy, he improves with every brushstroke. Every time he plays a game of rugby, he becomes a better player. He's just learning all the time. And he had another really rock-solid game. He just dominated the whole line-out scene in that test match. So that's a promising, I think it's one of the bright spots on the year, just the way he's come on. But look, there are other areas where obviously there's still uncertainty. What is the best combination in the loose forwards? Or that Wallace Sititi had a terrific game against Wales.
Yeah.
He was running with real determination. But then, there's the whole issue. We know Cam Roigard is head and shoulders at halfback. But Richie Mo'unga, I'm sure they'll move heaven and earth to try and get him on the tour.
He'll play in South Africa. So we know he's going to play. I mean, it'd be dumb if they didn't play. And so that 9-10 combination, I agree with you, is something that, look, if you look at Australia, they don't have a 10. I don't think we've got that quite right. We've got Roigard and cement, and then we haven't quite got and you could actually move that out, Tony, to the midfield, which we haven't quite secured who we want there. I think is interesting. You were telling me yesterday about how that back three with Jordan, Caleb, and perhaps Geordie Barrett at the back. I think that's looking really strong, and that is a combat against high ball. I think that looks strong. But 9, 10, 12, and 13 are uncertain for us at the moment, and I'm not sure that we still know, apart from Roigard, who our best players are in those positions.
Well, I think obviously they've got a lot of hope for Noah Hotham that he could develop into that sort of player because he's very strong. I think Dylan Pledger, the ceiling is massive for this guy, and I still think it was a mistake not to send him on one of the tours, either the All Blacks 15 tour or as an apprentice on this tour. I'm not quite sure why they didn't do that, but I think he's a guy to watch. He's certainly got the potential. And in terms of the 10, I actually thought Damian McKenzie had a really good game against Wales. He underplayed his hand. He didn't try and do too much, but his kicking out of hand was as good as anything we've seen from the All Black number 10 jersey.
Fair
he
call.
was finding space in between the Welsh players in the backfield and making really good gains. The ball was coming off his boot really nicely when he was kicking for touch, and he also couldn't miss his goal kicks as well. So I actually thought that
was impressive.
Maybe not against the same calibre of opposition as you'll get in other games, but that sort of just a little reminder, and as I say, didn't overplay his hand. The midfield, well, I mean, the big factor in that, I suppose, has been that they really decided that Geordie Barrett was their man at 12 and then he got injured, and so you've had these 6 different combinations that they've used throughout the year. I quite liked Tupaia and Whainga-Anuku simply because of the direct power running that they brought to the game. It's just the combination on defence, trusting each other, who's got this guy covered, who can make the tackle, not biting in, leaving space outside. But I suppose when you haven't played with players together, it's very hard to build that in the space of a week. So, yeah, there's definitely a big question mark, as there is a question mark over their attacking game. What is it that they are trying to do? Where's the attacking structure there? And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that vacancy created by the departure of Jason Holland, who, as I say, the players seem to really like the guy.
Just on that, can we just get so that, obviously you can't mention names and things, but you've been around the camp and the squad a lot more over the last weeks than you have been all year. Is that a feeling that you've got? And have people said that to you, that they really do like and respect this guy? Because this is important to say, because I think that the public perception perhaps is that, Jason's going because he's not good enough in that role or something like that. Maybe that's not the case.
Look, no, it was just a comment that was made that someone sort of passed on to me, that the players were quite sorry to see him go. That's all. That he was a popular guy. But the question now is what do they do? I don't think it's conceivable that that role is replaced by someone. I wonder whether it would be a good idea. Can they bring in a fresh idea, just something to try and just bring a bit more clarity or structure or whatever to the attack. There's just another voice in there somewhere. Yeah. I don't know. That'll all be discussed when they do the reviews. Maybe they'll look to promote from within, but I'm not sure, Martin. I wonder whether this is just an opportunity to make an adjustment 2 years out from the World Cup. It's just a really crucial stage in the development of this team.
So there are 2 aspects to this, isn't there? There is the players, and we're going to look at, we look at the players and how they performed and who performed in those roles. And I think you're right in terms of depth. And we've got, we're all in love with what Rassie's doing over there. Well, we're doing the same thing here. We're not at the same level as the South Africans are, where they can just seem to interchange player for player and so forth. But I think an equal question is about the coaching staff. What have they brought over 2 years? That's 27 tests now. Where are we at after 2 years? I think when you said before, you struck a really good point about what's our attacking intent here? What's our plan? What are our tactics? And I don't know whether or not we can honestly sit here after 27 tests and say, oh, yeah, we are all seeing it. And that is a worry to me as well. So do we have to grade the coaches and their performance as much as we do the players at the moment?
Well, one thing that struck me, a statistic again, that I think does say something about what's been going on, is that last year the All Blacks have always been famous for being able to turn defence into attack. That you absorb pressure, the opposition makes a mistake, and next thing they're heading back to their own goalpost. And it was something perfected under Wayne Smith, who had that stint as the defence coach, and that morphed into turning defence into attack. And so counter-attack has always been one of the most, or scoring off turnover ball has always been one of the great strengths of the All Blacks. Last year, this team scored 12 tries off counter-attacks. This year, they've scored 1.
Wow. Wow.
And that
what a stat.
That says to me is that maybe are they just getting a little bit conservative, don't want to take risks. And maybe part of that was last year, for example, in the test against France, when they were coming under pressure and they tried to counter-attack a couple of times and made mistakes and conceded points. To me, it was just about the judiciousness of when they tried to counter-attack or what they tried to do. But I'd still rather, that's in our DNA, and I'd still rather see that than just hoofing the ball back down, because there's so much kicking going on in the game. So maybe that sort of reflects a bit of a desire, not to make mistakes, or just a bit conservative, safety first, that sort of thing. I think All Black teams always play at their best when they're allowed to express and they see a chance, see something in front of you.
Yeah.
And so that I think, again, that's just something that they'll have to have a look at. South Africa next year, of course, is going to be one of the toughest places in the world if you want to do that. But that's a development that I've seen this year.
That's a hell of a
maybe
step.
that was just, yeah.
The other one, Tone, is that the amount of points conceded. And again, you get these numbers thrown at you and you think, oh, wow, okay, so I think this was the second most points we've ever conceded in a year. And last year is like the fourth most points we've ever conceded in a year. Now, you can interpret this in any kind of way. The way that rugby's played these days, you don't get as many 10-6 scorelines. You had, 70-something points scored between us and Wales, right? So, you get a lot more points scored. But again, is that something that you've noticed, though, looking at this team over 2 years, that defensively we aren't quite where we need to be at the moment?
No, I think that's more a reflection of how the game's being played these days, that you are getting more high-scoring games and, teams are getting out to leads and then losing them. It's a momentum game. I think the high kick law about not being allowed to escort or get players in between the catcher and the following through players, that's kind of changed the dynamic of the game a bit. But yeah, look, I think some of the tries definitely have come about simply because they haven't developed those connections and that trust that you need. Like when Conrad Smith and Matanonu were defending together, they knew what each other was going to do. Or even, a Ryan Crotty and their guys like that, they knew each other so well. And so they just knew that I'm going to trust him to get that guy and I'm going to stay on my guy, sort of thing. And just a couple of times in the last 2 weeks, we've seen guys biting and leaving space on the outside. And that, these are all things that just have to be developed in time as combinations grow. And as I say, when you 6 different midfield combinations, it's not just about the midfield as well, and also just momentum switches in the game. The way the game is played and refereed now, that a team gets on top, gets momentum, they start getting the penalties, and that's kind of how the game is shaped now. And it's really about trying to ride out storms. And look, they did that. You think about the way they defended towards the end in that Bledisloe Cup test against Australia. They made some massive defensive plays in
Eden
that
Park
game.
against the Saffers, mate. Same thing, Tony. We were up
Park
against it. Yeah. One other thing, though, when we get a lead as well. I mean, you look at all these things. I mean, overall, I'll always look positive. I'll always look glass half full at things because I think I enjoy the sport too much not to think about it otherwise. Plus, I also think that, as I said right at the start, we've proven we can beat everyone. We beat South Africa this year, and we hadn't done that for 4 tests. And so that's that marker there. Okay, I know what's happened subsequent, but you've still got that. You can't take away that Eden Park win. But we've got leads. And we've had these worrying patches in games right throughout the year where we've gone off the boil. Remember, we've been always talking, Tony, about if we could put 20 minutes of this here with 20 minutes of that there. That's another thing that I think over summer that the coaches and the players have got to really sort of get their heads around. Why do we concede 17 points against Scotland? I know it's momentum, but All Black teams in the past have been able to get a lead. Sure, we might get a counter punch, but we can still regain control. And you've kind of alluded to this, that somehow whatever happens, it just slips away from us a bit. And we can't afford to do that against the very best teams, because it happened against England, it happened against South Africa, it happened against Argentina. The same patterns, I mean.
Yeah, and as I say, it's like that domino effect of one error leading to another, which leads to another. And it's just something that they have to address, and they have to, a mistake gets made, right, we've just got to make damn sure that another one doesn't get made, or that we don't do something else wrong. So yeah, I think that just comes down to the messaging and the development of the leadership and the communication, and are they all on the same page and all those sorts of things. And it's something that they have to look at, because next year it could get brutal. That they've got this really tough schedule where they've got the three Nations Cup matches early in the year, then they go to South Africa, then a test that, as I say, we're hearing could be in Ireland against the Springboks as well, and then you've got the Nations Cup matches, same combination of matches as this year. It's a slightly different order, but Scotland, England, Wales over here next year. So it's a very, very demanding year, and these things, they have to be addressed, and they've got to be addressed with. There's got to be some clarity about the messaging, because that's something that you're hearing a bit more too, that people aren't convinced by some of the messaging they're hearing at the press conferences and things like that. I think that's something that really does need to be addressed going forward.
All right, so at the end, I gave it a C+, and I'm not going to spend the summer moping about it. I love my All Blacks, and I want us to get a hell of a lot better, but I don't think we're going to get better if we sit there and sugarcoat things. And so everyone that watches rugby can see what the rest of us are watching. I think it's hard to say we've improved a lot since last year, but I think there are positive signs there. We just got to keep looking at those and growing those. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, 10 wins out of 13 games as against 10 out of 14 last year. I think it would have been a really different picture had they won that England game. And I think you win a Grand Slam at the end of the year. The whole year
totally
is different.
Does.
And you can say, well, okay, we got dusted by the Springboks in Wellington, but we fought back from that. And I think that, in some ways, that's hence the disappointment. I think the players knew that. It really did feel like the air had been let out of the tyres. And I think, to be fair, they did bounce back pretty well towards the end of the week and lifted the spirits up, and they got the job done against Wales. So, in terms of a mark, I don't know, C+, B- probably. As I say, the problem is that you just can't escape from those three losses that we talked about, the magnitude of them or the significance of them, and it does tend to sort of throw shadow on whatever games. But look, they retained the Bledisloe Cup. They beat France 3-0, even if it wasn't anything like a full-strength French team. They had a test win against South Africa. That's not to be sniffed at. They beat Ireland and Scotland, who was seen as a potentially tricky opponent. So it's not all bad. It's just that
Agreed.
It's all kind of overshadowed by the magnitude of those three losses, and those will be the things that the rocks under the beach towel this summer. But obviously there's still a fair bit of work to be done with this team. I think the potential is there. As you say, that the depth is there. There are still a lot of, you get to the end of the year and you think, well, how many questions are still unanswered? What's been answered? Questions, answers. I think that's probably the perplexing thing, is that how many questions got answered this year. I think there was some progress for sure. There was development. There was of the depth, which I think is a priority going forward. But some problems that have been problems remain and need to be sorted out when you look at what lies ahead in the next 2 years.
Huge thank you to Novus Glass for sponsoring this episode of the DSPN and for being a proud partner of the Special Olympics New Zealand. This December, over 1,200 incredible athletes, along with hundreds of volunteers, coaches and other support staff, will be making their way to Christchurch or Tautahi for the Special Olympics New Zealand 2025 National Summer Games. Novus Glass is proud to be supporting something special, and you can help support the athletes too by texting Novus to 3598. That's Novus, Novus 3598. Thanks again, Novus Glass, for supporting us here on the DSPN. Windscreen, crack or chip, notice it, Novus it.
DSPN.